Right. Well, I think we'll make a start. Welcome everybody to this second of our virtual panel sessions that we've run this year. This time round, we're looking at some of the specialist lending market, and by way of introduction, my name's Rob McCoy, Senior Product and Business Manager, and we've got an esteemed panel of lender account managers that work with myself and TMA. So I'll quickly go through who we've got on the panel. From Kensington, we've got Adam Sheldon for the National Account Manager. From Bluestone, Phil Quinn, who's responsible for the network and club strategic relationships. From Together, Nick Parker, who's head of clubs and networks. From Pepper, Rob Barnard, intermediary relationship director. And from Zephyr, Andrew Rowe, head of sales. So before we start, we have got a quick poll question for the participants in the audience. So I'll just pull that up. So here we go. So do you think you'll be doing more specialist lending moving into the 2025?
You've banned us from voting, Rob.
Yes, I've banned you from voting. Yeah. I've banned you lot from voting. I think that's...
We certainly hope so.
Let's see. Now let's end the poll there and have a quick look at the results. So 33% have said yes, 67% said maybe, and nobody has said no. So that's a positive sign for us. So let's kick off with the first question. Adam, let's come to you first off. Given the outcome of the general election and the government's sizable majority, what does this mean for our industry? Will it have a positive impact? And if so, how? And has the election result yet impacted on any of your pricing of products?
Well, good morning, Rob, and good morning, everybody. It's a good question to start with, Rob. So thanks for that. I think the devil will be in the detail. I mean, just looking at initial reaction of the markets, swaps reacted quite well, and the pound went up. But I think it's important to note that this is different to where we were sort of post Trussonomics. So I think it was heavily predicted that Labour would win and win by majority. So I think swaps have behaved as expected. We have seen some rate cuts, of course, in the market as well. And the new government will obviously be keen to make a mark. You mentioned the sizable majority. I think what that perhaps gives is a bit of stability now and possibly some, renewed optimism, potentially more consumer confidence, particularly as it may coincide with possibly a rate cut in August, September time. We feel more likely September with sort of services inflation being a bit sticky. I think the markets are forecasting maybe a sort of 50-50 for August. So you might actually have possibly a busier summer than the usual slump and possibly a busier Q2, which I think we'll all benefit from. So I think, affordability remains the biggest challenge. So new government, possibly new optimism, more positive sentiment. You might see a few of those first-time buyers that have been sitting on the hands, taking the wait and see approach, potentially press ahead, depending on, how quickly Labour can get some of the initiatives in the manifesto over. So just to go through some of the plans, they want to obviously make a permanent mortgage guarantee scheme, which some lenders will take advantage of. So this will give insurance to lenders offering 95% mortgages. I think they're calling it freedom to buy. Interestingly, this wasn't in the manifesto, but they promised to shake up the mortgage market, and I know they've been pretty engaged with the industry, which I think is quite positive. But they've also mentioned, which wasn't in the manifesto, possibly boosting long-term fixed mortgages, which will give more options to customers and brokers. And of course, we've got our offering in the flexi fix for term solution there. Abolishing ground rent leasehold reform, I think that's pretty positive. And then obviously bringing back, planning on bringing back minimum efficiency for private rental sector by 2030. So that's going to be a challenge, and what impact will that have? And I think one subject close to our hearts at Kensington is, they want to plan on reducing carbon emissions from homes. So, I think time will tell. It's quite some list, and they've obviously got other issues to sort out apart from financial services. But yeah, I think initially fairly positive, although it was priced in. And I think time will tell in terms of, whether they deliver some of the promises.
Yeah, stability is what the market's like, isn't it? So, hopefully we will see that through the swap rates, etc. Nick, any thoughts from yourself on this?
Yeah, I mean, that was a fairly comprehensive summary. I think if you look at their commitment to try and keep rates low, it's good news probably that they've got that commitment. I'm not exactly sure that that's in their gift to deliver. I think there's a lot of external factors that are going to come into play that will determine how interest rates behave going forward. But the fact that they sort of share that commitment is great. They've got a commitment to deliver 1.5 million new homes over the next 5 years, which is going to breathe life into the Conservative pledge of 300,000 a year. Whether or not they've got the infrastructure and the support around them to be able to deliver on that, even with a mandatory target that they're talking about introducing, I think is still to be seen. But there are certain things that they'll need to deliver to make that happen, and we'll talk about that in more detail. I think there's some specific questions around that later on. But for me, I think one of the things that excites me more than anything else is their desire to build more towns. So rather than just delivering in terms of more housing, they want to build more towns. A little bit like Milton Keynes was. It's a city now, but it was a town when it was first built. And that's the way in which we're going to get this solution. That's really going to help the economy, because you're not just building houses, you're building an entire infrastructure that sits around that. You're creating jobs, you're creating a macro economy within those areas, but you're attracting investment. And that's the key. If you think about Milton Keynes and how that's built and how that's delivered, you've got huge businesses that have gone and built and invested in that area. Think about Santander as just one great example of somebody that's built their head office in Milton Keynes. Absolutely huge number of people that are working in that area. So it really attracts jobs, it really attracts investment. So I think that's one of the things that excites me the most, because that is going to give you a diversified lending opportunity. It's going to create lots of affordable housing. It's going to create lots of little suburbs within those areas as well, because there's no heart or centre to Milton Keynes, which I think some people see as a negative. But what it does do is it builds lots of villages. So you get lots of different communities, and that brings a rich diversity to the area as well. So overall, I think that's a real positive.
Rob, we do think the devil will be in the detail with the housing plans, etc., as both Adam and Nick have alluded to. What do you think the challenges are, and do you think these plans are going to be achievable?
I don't know what anybody else thinks, and this isn't political, but I'm just glad it's over, Rob, to be fair. I think we knew it was coming for quite some time, and it's done. The plaster's been ripped off. And I think people have been sitting on their hands a little bit, haven't they? Watching, waiting, seeing what's going to happen as a result of the election. I think in your previous question, you asked about, have we seen any rate reductions? We've seen a few minor tweaks, haven't we, and a few minor reductions. But I think a lot of lenders already saw what the result was most likely going to be, and had baked that result into sort of planning ahead of that. One thing I'd love to see coming out of the government, though, is Matthew Pennycook being given time to be the housing minister. because I think personally, I think he's the 17th incumbent in that position, Rob, since 2010. That's more the managers than Watford have had. It's absolutely ridiculous. You need somebody to be given that is responsible for our area of the business to be given time to make a difference. So I hope Mr. Pennycook sort of lasts in his job a long time. I think this green belt into grey belt situation, I think that'll have a lot of sort of local parish councils scratching their heads on decisions on sort of planning permission, but we'll see what comes out of that. And I think the couple of biggest challenges we face as a result of it, and I'll touch on a word that you said, Rob, earlier, stability. We've not had stability, have we now? Probably since Kwasi Kwarteng made his statement to Parliament in September 2022. One thing that's been missing, I think, in our market is pipeline building. You see it every couple of times a year, don't you? September is always a big pipeline building. A bit of a rate war goes on. People build the pipeline to make sure the completions start coming through in January. I've been on a few panels lately, Rob, where some of the big high street lenders are saying to the audience, put your tin hats on, you're going to have a very busy end to the year, and I hope that's the case. But coming back to try and turn some of those 67% that think they might write more specialist business, I've just got this feeling that if we do see the pipeline starting to be grown in earnest from the mainstream lenders, they might still be just that little bit more selective about the type of business they do. And I'm not talking about adverse credit there, I'm just talking about credit score. And that's something I want to shout out really to the audience. Don't just think specialist lending is all about adverse credit. To me, we pick up the baton when the high street says no. And I think there'll be a lot of that as the big lenders start to build their pipelines. The second challenge we're all facing, and I think Nick and Adam related to it, is affordability. That's the key. They can build as many houses as they want, but it's affordability that's the problem. And I think, but you look at it in two ways, Rob. We look at this 4.5 times cap that we're given by the regulator. That's what we have to work within. But you look over the last 2 years, the cost of living crisis that we faced, with people staring down the barrel of spiraling costs. In some ways, you know what? It was probably a good place that was in place, because it kept the arrears situation under cap. So I think stability, I think we're going to see a really positive end to the year, but I think you'll have more opportunity to use lenders like us five, because I think the high street may say no, but affordability is key. And if we can't increase the 4.5 times cap, or sort of do much more over 4.5 times, I think the key where specialist lenders can help your sort of viewers and your members, Rob, is by making more of the affordability that's available. Second jobs, self-employed, treating them different, trying to make more of that sort of affordable housing.
Yeah, we'll touch on the self-employed bit in a moment. So Phil, is there anything from Bluestone that they see as the challenge for the housing minister at the moment that the others haven't already touched on?
Right. Good morning, everyone. Firstly, one of the terms I keep hearing is the phrase NIMBY, which stands for not in my backyard. Although we call it a garden in the UK, don't we? But what that refers to is, everyone is keen to back the government on delivering 1.5 million homes over the next 5 years. But I think there'll be a lot of local pushback if it is in your backyard, especially the bigger cities, the busier towns, given the infrastructure challenges, traffic, hospital, schools, you name it. I do think there'll be local pushback. And to allude to Nick's point previously, let's create those new towns, because that will then give the opportunity for that freedom of new build projects. So I think we will see some local pushback. From a Bluestone point of view, we're sort of initiating how we can really drive and support first-time buyers, in particular when they fall in the specialist category. We recently joined the Deposit Unlock group. Deposit Unlock is a new build scheme with only a 5% deposit. There's only a handful of lenders on that scheme, and Bluestone are the only specialist lender. So we're trying to play our small part in helping customers, fulfill their objectives of buying a property. But I do think in the new build space in particular, we need further radical change to really support first-time buyers getting onto the ladder. Of course, we've had Help to Buy, which was a great success, and I'm sure that will come back in some shape or form. The only fear that I do have about it is that it creates what I would describe as artificial property price inflation, and it kicks the can down the road to a degree. I have a friend in this position at the moment whereby he took out Help to Buy 5 years ago. He's now looking to move on. The house isn't big enough. and he's got to give 20% back to government. It's eaten into his equity, and he's almost got to start from scratch. And he needs some sort of support to be able to get to the next level of housing. So, whilst it delivers in the short term, I think the government may need to think a bit longer term how such a scheme may impact the market in a number of years to come.
Yeah. Thanks for that. Just going back to you, Rob, a minute. Do you think the private sector will benefit under this? The private rental sector will benefit under this new government and their plans?
I don't know, mate. I think it's a challenge. I think at Pepper, Rob, we pulled out of buy-to-let 2 years ago. When, being honest with you, it got hard, and that's me being honest with you. It was becoming very difficult to sort of make the deal fit, shall we say? I think there'll be pressure to make it work, Rob, but I don't know what it looks like. And there's guys that do buy-to-let and are more active in the buy-to-let panel on here today that probably can offer a more sort of rounded answer on that.
Andrew, welcome. We've not heard from you yet, but landlords have had it tough recently. So what's happening at Zephyr that can support landlords, and where do you see the opportunities in the second half of this year?
It's a great question, and my esteemed colleagues across the panel here have touched on some of the difficulties we've seen, and we've seen the same thing in the last couple of years. It's been incredibly difficult with the swap rate mechanism being like a heart attack monitor in free fall, and also the securitization market went through a really traumatic time. But I do feel like, and we're certainly seeing that obviously swap rates are starting to stabilize a little bit, and I think from a hope perspective, we're all hoping that continues to be the case. Certainly, the securitization markets have started to open up again, which is giving funders or lenders like us that are funded by the wholesale market, is giving us confidence to actually build books again and actually start to put lending back out for clients to get a hold of. So I think that's a really positive situation. But from our perspective, we also run the DPS, which many of you will know, some people on the call will not, which is the Deposit Protection Service. And we regularly run sort of surveys through that service to try and get a sense of what landlords are seeing, what they're feeling. And one of the interesting things, that poll at the beginning was quite interesting. 67% may look to do some specialist lending. And we certainly think that is where there is a huge amount of opportunity moving forward, Rob, because if you look at the HMO sector, for instance, only 1% of landlords across the UK play in the HMO sector. And we think there's a big opportunity there for brokers to really build their knowledge around HMO lending and actually convey that knowledge across to their landlord clients, because a lot of people are nervous about Article 4 and selective licensing, additional licensing, this kind of stuff. And so they tend to steer away from it. And I do a lot, like Rob, I do a lot of other panel stuff, and we do a lot of presentations to landlords directly. And it's good to get engaged with landlords to get their sense of where the market sits. And when you talk about HMOs, there is a lot of nervousness there because they just don't understand the space particularly well. So we think there's opportunity for brokers to engage in that and start sharing that information. In terms of affordability, I mean, Rob touched on the 4.5 cap. Obviously, the PRA guidelines have caused some challenges. But again, to Rob's point, you sort of see the fact that those guidelines are there as really kind of curb lending to a degree. And now, clients are looking at, and lenders as well, of course, are looking at how we can support that. And you've seen the sort of advent of the large fee. And there's always a lot of interest to me when you talk to brokers face to face. You get a lot of pushback about the fee situation that's available now. But actually, when we do analysis of our products sales, big fees are the biggest part of our product set that's selling. So, clearly there's people looking to leverage lower rates, and you have to be, you really have to think about how you can work around the guidelines that are there to deliver opportunity out into the market. So I think there's a lot of things going on. Lenders are really analysing the space to see how they can play within the guidelines, but give opportunity to customers and brokers alike.
Do you think that the large fee situation, though, is because it's being treated as a commercial transaction? It's not a residential. I'm buying my own home, and that's why landlords are probably more comfortable with that type of arrangement to get the lower rate for the case.
Yeah, I absolutely do. I mean, you know, it's if you've got a big property in the southeast that's got a large mortgage balance and you're taking a large fee, it can be a bit of a bitter pill to swallow. But of course, that fee is offsettable against tax. Um, but like you say, it gives you the maneuverability to get the rate to meet the stress test parameters that have been laid down. And you know, a lot of people have been, you know, we're seeing people that have got portfolios that, you know, are near or slightly underwater, that, you know, are struggling to get out of their position, and they need opportunity to be able to move, you know. And presumably there are players here that have backbook clients. I mean, we hold a huge amount of backbook lending in our Topaz brand, you know, and there's a lot of clients there that since we talked about the mini budget a couple of years ago and the rates going up, there's some people on some pretty steep rates there that potentially feel trapped, and they're looking for opportunities to refinance away to more competitive lending now that SVR situation has gone sort of skyward for them. So yeah, it is a commercial decision at the end of the day, and you need to give clients the space and opportunity to be able to plug into what's potentially available and let them make the decisions that are right for their business.
Nick, have you a thought on landlords and what you're doing to help them?
Yeah, I think first and foremost, I think it's fair to say in the historic government's attempts to clean up the buy-to-let, the PRS sector, you know, buy-to-let used to be quite accessible for everybody, and I think landlords have been the easy target for governments to attack with legislation, tax changes, you name it. They've had the butt of it, and it's become more inaccessible than it's ever been before. We're seeing a whole generation of landlords potentially exiting the private rented sector, and the new generation isn't stepping up as quickly as we would like to see them step into that role. And that might be down to the accessibility, it might be down to the larger deposits that are needed and the higher yields that are needed to be able to secure the lending. But it's a challenge that this government need to think about. You know, that they can't keep alienating landlords. They are the backbone of the economy. You know, we need the private rented sector in this country desperately. We need to stop treating them the way we do and bring them into the fold and work with landlords and the agencies that represent those landlords to see how we can deliver better for tenants. You know, I get they got to do things like the Section 21 and abolish that and get rid of no-fault evictions, but they need to be careful how far they take this legislation that just becomes a handcuff to private landlords in this country. That there is more of a diversification. We are seeing that. You know, people are diversifying to try and find those greater yields. It's already been talked about, HMO and the opportunity that presents. It's not just HMOs. You've got semi-commercial, and commercial and those kind of areas, holiday lets, all those kind of areas that people are diversifying their portfolios into to try and give them that additional yield. Just to give you some idea, I mean, we thought last year that perhaps buy-to-let was going to struggle this year. We thought there was going to be some challenges around that area. We've lent 49% more in the buy-to-let area this year than we did last year. 49% more. I mean, that's a huge volume increase for us in terms of that. Now, that could be down to customers not being able to get what they need from the high street, which is driving them to more specialist lenders to be able to deliver. It could be down to them diversifying into areas that traditionally more vanilla type lenders just shy away from, like your semi-commercial and those areas, which are absolutely bread and butter for specialist lenders like Together. So there is huge opportunity for those that are prepared to look under, you know, wherever they can to spot those opportunities that aren't just your mainstream straightforward for 2 up, 2 down properties.
Let's park buy-to-let and landlords for the moment. First-time buyers. Adam, first-time buyers have had a particularly hard time getting on the housing ladder. So what are you doing to support them?
Oh, fantastic. I mean, first-time buyers are a huge part of what we do at Kensington. I mean, first off, we've got products with no upfront fee options, which I know our brokers really like those products. So we've got products with a fee and keep the repayments as low as possible, or without a fee. You know, when you think about how difficult it is for first-time buyers to save a deposit, etc. So that's a good option. Of course, we don't credit score. We've got manual underwriting. I was actually at a TMA workshop a couple of weeks ago, and I actually put our BDM on the spot and asked him what would the top 5 reasons be for coming to Kensington. So we listed off sort of 5 criteria points, but then one of the brokers who used us recently said I'd also add your underwriting to that. So we've got a proactive approach to underwriting. We're looking at applications on day one. So you think about that uncertainty the first-time buyer has. You know, you come into a lender like Kensington, you're getting that decision a lot quicker with an underwriter, which will talk the broker through the whole process. What we see at Kensington, we have a lot of first-time buyers that have possibly a thin credit profile, maybe a lack of history. So those are the types of cases that we help. And what about mid LTV products? So we were the first lender to launch into mid LTV range. So we've got products at 92.5% LTV, for example. So, you know, first-time buyers currently saving in buckets of 5%, which could be anything between 15 and 20 grand. So we're trying to do our bit to innovate and to keep those repayments as low as possible, which basically means that the customer only pays for what they need. So it'll be interesting to see if other lenders will follow suit. And of course, the product is based on a lower reversionary rate, an interest rate than a 95%. So rather than, if it's a 92.5% product, for example, LTV, previously they would have to go up to the 95% range, which would hamper the affordability. So that's a big positive. New build space, we're a new build. We've got shared ownership options. There's a couple of different options around different LTV bands as well. So with a bigger deposit, again, a lower rate. 95% for non-new builds as well, 90% on flats and houses. And we made some affordability changes in the background in April, actually, which is just boosted buying power for applicants. So, I mean, we track a lot of illustration data, and I think the spring months cooled a little bit, whereas our business levels went the other way. So we were growing in a market which is softening slightly, which is really, really positive. And I think sort of Rob mentioned the different income streams that specialist lenders can take. So we're pretty good for certain demographics as well. We first lender to launch a hero range, for example. We've got higher income multiples for those types of customers, so nurses, etc., public sector workers, professionals, self-employed. So, you know, I mean, Rob will say this all day long: speak to your BDM, get them in your office. You know, we're all about helping you write more business. So if it's a first-time buyer that's, you know, maybe got a lack of credit history, got some adverse credit, or maybe he's got a job. When we've seen recently a bigger uptick in the younger generation going into self-employed, for example. So we might see more self-employed first-time buyers. So all of these different solutions, the world has changed. Definitely speak to lenders like ourselves. And there's a full list on our website. We continue to look at all the different solutions, etc. So lots of stuff that we do. So definitely get your BDM into your office for sure.
Phil, you touched on deposit unlock as one of the things you're doing for first-time buyers. Is there anything else within your suite of products that is appropriate and something different?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, Bluestone are a leading specialist lender in the complex credit space. So we're very much here to help those customers who have faced credit blips, CCJs, defaults, mortgage arrears, etc. We also look at the complex income world as well. So very much supporting contractors, whether it's 0 hours, CIS, day rate contractors, and also the self-employed. So the fact that we'll take 1 year's trading, or we'll use the latest year's income in affordability. So as a specialist lender, you'd very much expect us to manually assess the case, which we do. In Bluestone, we are very tech savvy. So you'll fly through the system. We interlink with Experian, Open Banking, Home Track as well. But we do apply that manual underwriting so that we are discretional with how we treat each and every customer. Aside from sort of the Bluestone wins, if you like. Where I actually think there's a great challenge in the market, and by the same token, this becomes a great opportunity for advisors, is that over 40% of applicants who have adverse credit believe they can't obtain a mortgage. And that's a real problem, because if 4 in 10 people sat at home, sat in the pub with their mate, are hearing the story, you can't get a mortgage because of this, then they're not picking up the phone in the first place. So I do think we've got a bit of a way to go when it comes to the education and the awareness, in particular for first-time buyers, because more often than not, they will go to their bank that they've been loyal to for so many years. As soon as they say no, you know, where did he go from there? So that's a real big opportunity. And you know, my challenge to the audience today is, you know, think about how you can market that great opportunity to those consumers. Because like I say, if they're not picking up the phone, if they're not dropping you an email in the first place, you know, how do we support them? How do we capture them? So use that information and think, wow, a lot of people there actually need the support. They've been told they can't get it. You know, let's invite them in and talk to them about all the opportunities beyond the high street banks.
Rob, you mentioned self-employed earlier, and that they have self-employed workers are a key feature of the labour market, but they still do face some sort of barriers getting a mortgage. How can Pepper and other specialist lenders help the brokers find the right products for these self-employed customers?
I think you're right, and Adam and Phil make some great points there, and I'll probably pull on a couple of those in this particular section, Rob, if that's all right. I mean, at Pepper, every year we issue what we call our specialist lending study. We issued I think it was our 7th iteration in November last year, just to show how we think the specialist market's changed. We used to call it our adverse credit study. Yeah. But coming back to my first part, it's so much more than adverse. So we now call it a specialist lending study. And one area of focus in that is the self-employed market. Of all our recipients, we do this in conjunction with YouGov, Rob, so it's a very robust, official, proper survey and research. 80% of the self-employed recipients said, we find it harder to get a mortgage just because we're self-employed. And that, I think, is scary. I think that's a scary statistic. And I think it was Phil that touched on it. What you'll get from specialist lenders maybe that you don't get from the high street, and all right, there are some high street lenders that do this, so let's not tar everybody with the same brush, is we do take a very sort of forward-thinking approach, because we know fluctuations can happen in self-employed income. So again, like Bluestone referred to, we will take your latest year's figures. We will take your first year's figures if you're a new startup. And coming out of the pandemic, this I think was a perfect solution. And a real life example to bring it to life, we had a builder. And if you think before the pandemic, extensions were going up left, right and centre, builder's figures were no problem at all. And for 12 months of the pandemic, the builder couldn't set foot outside his door to lay a brick. And if you remember, 12 months after that, there was a brick shortage. You couldn't get bricks to lay, if you remember. But then the following year, people had saved up so much money during the don't go out phase that they were having extensions built left, right, centre again. So for us to use his latest year's figures was a perfect solution for him, as opposed to averaging it out over a 2 or even a 3 year period. And again, we also saw through the pandemic, well, people came out of it thinking, you know what, I don't want to be this anymore, I want to be that. We saw butchers become bakers. So again, where you used to have to wait and prove 2 years' income, we'd use that first year's trading figures. But not only that, I mean, what we are also seeing is the cost of living crisis is still biting. I think it's a little bit easier than it was, but we're still facing it. And we're finding so many people are now having to take a second job to actually get to the end of the month. And what specialist lenders like Pepper will do, and many of my colleagues, is that we will actually take 100% of that second job's income, provided it's provable. And the second employment can often be a self-employment on the side. So effectively, what we're saying there is we're boosting affordability by making more of the affordability that's available. So if you've got somebody there that's got a second job or a sidelined in self-employment that's provable by figures and accountants, etc., look at specialists, because we can help you boost that affordability.
Yeah, if I can come in there, Rob, yeah, I absolutely agree with Rob and Phil. Kensington, we use the latest year, give the choice of salary and dividends or net profits, and that side hustle, you know, the additional job. We've seen a lot more of that at Kensington as well, Rob. So, you know, I can think of a few cases where they've been self-employed but also had employment on the side. So as long as it's plausible that that applicant can do those jobs, we will consider it. And just in terms of the wider question around support, in terms of helping brokers place self-employed customers, I think it goes back to Phil's point around, mentioned 40% of customers that have got some adversity don't even bother searching for a mortgage. We did some research not long ago and found that 36% of self-employed customers didn't even bother applying as well for fear of rejection. So I think we all need to think about how we support those customers. Our latest webinar is on our website. If you didn't catch that, it was completely dedicated to this very subject. So do check that out as well. I mean, just some suggestions from, I've seen brokers do this really well. They have on their website a section on self-employed mortgages, on customers with adverse credit. They put case studies on there. They put their Trustpilot scores on there and reviews. So if you're a customer searching and they come across your website and it's a window into your world, then that's going to help you capture that customer, at least to make that be comfortable to make that initial inquiry.
Rob, I think the reason why that's so vitally important is that the vast majority of specialist lenders do not accept any business direct from a customer. They have to come through intermediary lenders like ourselves. And I think that's one of the biggest challenges we face. I think there are so many opportunities in specialist lending, but the challenges we have is making the customer know those. So it's great doing education with you, with your brokers. It's great that the trade press run with us a lot and educating brokers. But I think what we have to try and do is engage with the national press to try and get this message out to the consumer. Because I guarantee you, if a Sunday night, somebody's had a glass of wine, they're sat at home saying, I'm self-employed, I'm finding it hard to get a mortgage, I've got a CCJ, I've missed a mortgage payment. They'll find lenders like Pepper and the rest of the guys that are on here today, but they can't come to us direct. So the key thing is for the members, for people listening, just make sure that your website scream out the solutions you offer. 21% of our specialist lending study, 21% of people with a CCJ thought they had to wait 5 years before they could get a mortgage. And at Pepper, as you know, we'll do it after as recently as 3 months. Scream out the solutions and get people to talk to you.
There's a couple of things probably to just add to that in terms of just answering the key question there is, how do specialist lenders support brokers to find the right products? And I think that there's a little bit more granularity around that. Technology has moved on. Technology is now at the point where brokers have access to lots of different criteria sourcing systems that are available. They've got access to great support through help desks like the TMA help desk and other ones like that. It's the specialist lender's responsibility to make sure that those people are informed and understand how accessible we are as a group of lenders, not just in terms of being able to submit business terms, but actually to be able to engage with us. We can then help the brokers understand and guide on what we can do and what we can help with. For example, we've had a lot about latest year's accounts, but also there are lenders like Together that will do forecasted income. There's things that you can do there, but it's making sure that we all have a collective responsibility to make sure those sourcing systems, those criteria systems are fully up to date and contain the granular detail that brokers need to be able to signpost them to the right lender at the right time. Everybody on here has a USP that makes them the right lender for the right customer. And those kind of systems will signpost and direct them to those lenders to be able to get the right result for their customers in the quickest and most efficient way possible. So I think it's really important we invest time. And I think if you think about a lot of lenders out there, they maybe do that as a side of desk approach. It becomes a deprioritized approach that, we'll get round to updating it when we get round to it. But it's those specialist lenders like the ones on here that are dedicated to understand the importance of those systems and invest time in maintaining them, keeping them up to date and keeping their criteria relevant for brokers. They're the ones that will succeed.
Can we just very quickly, I'm conscious of the time, can we just very quickly touch on criteria areas? And one of the things, I was recently listening to a podcast and somebody mentioned on there that they'd had a client who was trying to buy an apartment and the lender wouldn't lend because it didn't have a lift in the building. The apartment was on the ground floor, so why would he need the lift? But it's eventually that they manage to place the case with somebody. But is there more that lenders can do regarding things like property types, flats above certain outlets and businesses and things like that? And it probably falls more so into the rental side of the market. So Andrew, is there anything in your wish list that you're looking at that you can perhaps give a bit of comfort to our members?
I think this is a massive area, Rob, and a great one to be getting into. And I was just listening to what Nick was saying there, and I completely back what Nick was saying about, there are so many tools now that brokers can plug into. But additionally, off the back of that, they need to start engaging with the lenders. And I think the opportunity here for brokers, especially, and I'm going to come on to your point, but I think the opportunity for brokers here is to talk to us, because there's so much nuance in what we do. And I think there's so much opportunity in how we work. And if I think if I think of Zephyr specifically, so I'm going to give an example of something that's cropped up in our world relatively recently that we've taken a decision to start lending on. And that's someone came to us with, they were looking to buy company shares rather than the assets within. So I think there were 5 assets within this particular company, and they're worth about 1.5, 1.6 million, something like that. And the client had the opportunity to buy all of the assets, but by way of buying the company. So there was a stamp duty of 0.5%, so a massive reduction in stamp duty. Now, very few lenders play in that space in the UK, but we took the detail and we sat down at Credit Risk and had a look at it and go, well, where are the pitfalls and how can we work with this? And we took advice from our legal teams, and we've come back with a solution. So I think, to answer the question, there are things that we can be doing on an ongoing basis, and that's quite a complex area of lending. But I think it shows the nature of how lenders, like the lenders on this panel today, think. And you've got to look at the risk factor of what you're doing. I think above commercial is always a tricky one. There are more and more lenders moving into the above commercial space. The difficulty, of course, is resaleability to the whole of market if you get into a repossession event, right? Because not everybody wants to live above or next door to a petrol station, but it does become a challenge. But I think there are more and more specialist players coming into this space. They price accordingly for the risk, but at least it gives the opportunity for clients to have choice. And I think that's what we need to do. If you look at all of us on this panel today, I think it was Rob that said we had, we've all got our USPs, and we do, and there's a lot of overlap. But I think the opportunity for brokers is to be talking to us. And one of the things that we say to brokers is, on average in the specialist space, Rob, about 50% of cases complete. But if you engage with the lender, the BDM team, and you actually talk through the case and you get under the hood, then the percentage opportunity for that case to complete rises drastically. And I think that's the thing. We're talking about education, and I think there are opportunities there brokers just aren't aware of. So I think lenders are constantly developing policy, looking at nuance, looking at change. But brokers need to keep plugging into those lenders to find out where that development is happening. And it's just ongoing conversations. Keep talking to us, keep updating, keep learning, keep plugging in. I think that's where it sits. And lenders, if I go back 2016, how many lenders did Airbnb? And now, most lenders we don't actually, but most lenders, a lot of lenders play. I pick on it, but it's the point that a lot of lenders play in that space, right? And I think that's the thing. I mean, I can say how many lenders do share purchase. We do, others don't. But that's the opportunity. I think we need to be driving into our specialisms.
I think, Rob, just one bit from me there, and I'm not in the buy to let space, but I think you're right. I think your question answers itself. Do we need to do more to try and make sure we're lending on more types of properties? I think we do. I think one phrase that must fear brokers and customers is valuers' comments. Yeah. And I think we need to probably, as a collective now, try to make sure that across the specialist lending arena, there are very little property types we'll say no to. I mean, I take my hat off to the likes of Together. Together have made a very good business out of property types. But I do think we need to work together to try and link together. We need to work together to try and get.
Are we talking about a merger here or what?
Hey, stop it! That's how rumours start. That's how rumours start. I'll be working for Nick next week. So it's about trying to get rid of those valuers' comments, because as soon as a customer or a broker hears valuers' comments, the deal's dead. So we need to try and make sure that we can fill most of those voids.
It was a nice introduction there from Rob on the types of property that together we'll consider. It's probably easier to list the properties that we won't consider than it is to look at the ones that we will. We fill the gaps where perhaps the risk appetite from lenders. I mean, especially if you look at the EPC thing that's been going on for the last few years, more and more high street lenders are interrogating their stock. They want to try and get the stock level below an average EPC rating of C. So they're trying to attract, nice, clean, energy efficient property. But there's loads of properties out there that just can't meet that. Especially in the semi-commercial world, ex-local authority, those kind of properties. And they offer a great opportunity. Just a few weeks ago, we did a property for somebody that was looking to buy an old post office with a spar shop at the back of it. It was still current as a post office, had a spar shop at the back and a flat above it. Now the flat represented 45% of the square footage of the building, and we did that on a residential first charge mortgage. And that's the kind of flexibility that we've got as specialist lenders to be able to take a slightly different adaptive approach to support customers find a way to get this without having to go and get commercial mortgages or whatever it might be. So there's plenty of opportunity where property stock is concerned.
Good. It's good to hear. It's good to hear. Actually, as we're coming up to the closure here, what are the benefits that are out there for brokers who may be hesitant into moving into the specialist lending area of the market? Adam, do you want to start with that?
Yeah, I mean, I guess the question back is why would they be hesitant? So maybe they've had experience in the past where it might take too long to get the answer and the service levels aren't what they should do. I mean, at Kensington, we've been working really hard on a service proposition. For 2.5 years, we've been at day one service levels. So that should give a bit of comfort. So, maybe consider us as the high street of the specialist world, perhaps. But the opportunities are huge. It has been a growing part of the market. So if you go back from the financial crash, I think it was the fastest growing part of the market up until the pandemic. And now it's, look at illustration data again, it's growing again. And look, we've talked about the cost of living crisis. There's lots of drivers to suggest that more and more customers will be coming to the likes of the lenders on this panel in years to come. And ultimately, we're all here for the customer. So if your customer walks through the door and you can't place them with the high street, it's probably your duty of care really to give them the right solution for them. And we've got plenty of talent within our teams. The BDMs across all the lenders here are fantastic at what they do. So they could help you. And, my tip would be get them in your office, book them in each quarter, because we do change criteria and it's very competitive out there. We've got huge growth plans at Kensington now. We've got the Barclays funding, got loads of appetite. So we're going to be going into new areas. So get your BDMs into your office and they will talk you through how to essentially write more business, which is what we're all here for.
Yeah, I would agree with that, Rob. I think, if from a broker's perspective, if you look over the last few years before the trust fiasco and just how busy we were, there were so many brokers are working in their lane, the lane that they're comfortable with lenders that they know, the volumes coming through their office and they're just servicing it. And I think the last couple of years have really highlighted how you have to really diversify your thinking if you want to grow a big successful brokerage. And there is so much opportunity in the market now, especially in specialist lending. And I think if you grab hold of it with both hands as a broker and you really invest time in understanding what we do as a group of lending and really plug into that. And off the back of that, there's so much opportunity in the protection market to service what needs to be done, even in the specialist space. I get brokers say to me, landlords don't want protection. Of course, landlords want protection and they absolutely need it. And it's incumbent upon the broker to understand why that is and start educating the landlord about what the opportunity is for them to protect themselves, but also grow their portfolio, or if it's in residential lending, whatever they're doing, they just need to plug into the specialist. And I'm excited to see from Zephyr's perspective, we've done so many events this year where we've had specialist lending events. We've done quite a few with Pepper, which have been great. And we've had so many so many brokers plugging into them going, I want to learn. So it's great that, people are tuning into this today to find out just where the opportunities are in the specialist space. And I think it's an exciting time.
Rob, I think I think the good news is the guys that have dialed in today already get it. And I think it's getting that message out further and wider. I think it's never been simpler to use a specialist lender than it is today. I think the education that BDMs offer is phenomenal. And my challenge to brokers is don't let a BDM through the door if they can't help you write more business. It's as simple as that. And yes, of course, you need to know all your high street BDMs to help you when cases start to go wrong. But just make a friend of a specialist BDM, because I think that will reap benefits for you. I think if you look at what I love, nothing better than if I'm stood on a TMA stand somewhere and somebody comes up and says, Rob, I don't write your type of business. We get that loads. And I think, sadly, you might. And a couple of key facts that might point to that from our study. Our study suggests now there could be as many as 15 million people in the UK today that have a history of adverse credit. 7 million of those have had it in the last 3 years. So if you're looking at a 3-year credit scoring history, and 1 million of those 7 million want a mortgage this year. They're going nowhere near a high street lender, and they can't come to us direct, so they need to come through you wonderful people. So final bit from me on that is don't be afraid of specialist lending. What you'll get from specialist lending like Pepper, and something we pride ourselves on here, is we give you direct access to an underwriter. And I'm a massive believer that a 2-minute conversation with an underwriter at any stage of the application process will be the best 2 minutes you'll ever spend. Because at the end of that 2 minutes, you know the case is either dead and you need to place it somewhere else, or you know exactly what you need to get that case offered. So using specialist lenders, we use conversation, not credit score, and we'll help you turn your blips into dips. Very simple.
Bill, do you think you want to add to that?
Yeah, couple of points I'd add. We've talked a lot about the growth of specialist lending and how active and buoyant it is. But think about that emotional connection and the loyalty base of your client bank as well. It's a fantastic job when you place a case with a high street lender. But ultimately, if you're helping the customer who really is in a pickle, they've been turned away from multiple brokers because of their adverse, because of their self-employed position, I can tell you confidently that emotional connection is beyond what you will place with a high street bank. And what does that mean? It means further loyalty. The customer talks, they talk to their friends, their family. It increases your referral opportunity, and actually it makes you feel proud beyond perhaps placing a really simple high street case. So you've got the customer side, that emotional connection, and then on the financial side for yourselves, roughly for every 3 high street cases you place, you could be placing 2 specialists and earn the same. So if you want to think about growing your own business and how to be dynamic and adapt to what is a forever changing market, by entering the specialist world, you will earn more and more at pace. And how good would that be for your compliance as well? 1 less case there each time you place every 2. So yeah, great opportunity, both from the customer point of view and from your own business and your own pocket as well.
Phil, your point on emotional connection is spot on. I mean, we've got almost 5,000 Trustpilot reviews, and we ask both the customer and the broker to leave a review. And what we find is we see lots of customers that leave a review when they've struggled to go direct, and they're really thankful of the broker. So they're more likely to leave you a review as well, which you can then put on your website and all that sort of stuff to attract more clients. Absolutely spot on. Great point.
And I'll just add to that one very quick point is I've got my own little podcast series, and I was recording one episode one day, and I came out of the booth and the sound engineer said to me, "Are you from Pepper?" I said, "I am." He said, "I've got my mortgage with you. You saved my life." And that was a real life example of somebody I stumbled across. And he actually came on the podcast with me and told his story. And it was a great, really emotional heartstring being tugged, but it shows that the sort of lending we do does make a massive difference to people.
Finally, Nick, anything from you want to add?
I think it's the opportunity is diversification. The opportunity is defensive as well. Protect your customer base and protect your client bank, because if you aren't exploring the opportunities that specialist lending can present, somebody else is, and somebody else will be speaking to your customers about it, and they shouldn't be. You know, they should be looking to you as the source of that insight, the source of that information, and their guide through the financial forest that we see ourselves walking through at the moment. So take advantage of all of the information that's available at your fingertips, the sourcing, the help desks, the BDMs. There's so much there that gives you access to that insight to make you look like the SMEs that you are within specialist lending. So take advantage of us.
Before we finish, we've got one final poll question for the audience. So let's take that one back, and let's go with this one. Do you now feel prepared when dealing with specialist cases for your clients?
Oh, we're banned again.
Oh, yes, you're banned. You're banned. Right, I think that's everyone's voted in there now. So there we go. So 13% say yes, very prepared, but 88% are comfortable. So again, the signs are good for the specialist lending market.
I would just say on that, Rob, that how to get those 88% to very, very comfortable. This has been a great session today, just talking about the opportunity in the market. But, you know, off the back of this, plug into each and every one of these lenders and arrange a Teams call where you get into the detail about what we do. Because there are, I mean, I've heard Rob present and a few others here present, and there are some fantastic specialisms around these group of lenders. And if you just take the time to plug in and learn, you'll go from comfortable to really prepared. So take the opportunity. Carpe diem.
And just on the side thing, a final question for everybody. Try and keep it short and sweet. What one work-related item is keeping you awake at night? So we'll start with Rob Barnard.
Thanks, mate. I'm not going to come in with swaps and the volatility. I'm going to come in with, I've never known our market be so buoyant with regard to events and educational programs, which I think is really good to show that brokers want to learn. So the thing that keeps me awake at night is making sure I'm in the right bed to be at the right venue for the right event the following morning.
Bill?
Well, apart from my kids, if we keep it to work, what's keeping me up? It's actually what I referred to earlier. You know, the vulnerability of customers whereby they believe they can't obtain a mortgage, and I've seen firsthand where people have been declined. They really have relied on support and professional advice, and have been shown the door. So, you know, that is ultimately, you know, the most worrying thing for me. So take the bull by the horns with this one and go find those customers.
Andrew?
I sleep like a baby, Rob, in the knowledge that we've got fantastic people around our industry. You know, today's event is a prime example of what's available for people just to learn, to improve, to grow. We've got, you know, I can't remember who earlier mentioned, you know, there are some fantastic, you know, support people around all of our businesses, telephone BDMs, BDMs, supporting brokers. So I sleep like a baby knowing that we've got this under control and we're just going to keep it moving in the right direction. So I think we're in a great space and things are just looking positive and rosy to me. Maybe I've got rose tinted glasses, but that's how it feels.
Nick?
I think for me, it's the pace at which specialist lending market is growing. Is, you know, people might be surprised to know that Together has over 750 colleagues working at there. We're quite a sizable operation now, but even that I don't think is sufficient resource to be able to support the volume of specialist lending that is coming this group's way in the next couple of years as a result of the growth in adverse credit, the growth in challenges through affordability and the cost of living crisis and all those kind of things that are coming out of it. We're all here to support it, but I think the question is can we grow at the pace that the market is heading in our direction?
And finally, Adam?
Apart from too much coffee, I mean, one area that we've been thinking about at Kensington is, and Rob's touched upon this with his study, the amount of customers with recent credit blips over the last 6 or 12 months. So if you think about those solutions, they'll typically come in at higher rates, but maybe sort of 1 year on, 2 years on, they technically should be eligible for a lower rate. So is there something that lenders can do to support those types of clients? So keep your eyes on your inbox.
Okay. Well, thank you all guys for attending and supporting us today. I've got a personal shout out to all the participants. At the end of November, we've got our TMA conference at the Vox Conference Centre by the NEC in Birmingham, 28th of November. If you can grab your smartphones and scan the QR code and get yourself registered. I'm pleased to say that all the guys that you've heard from today, their companies will be represented at the conference. So if you've got any further follow-up questions with the guys, 28th of November, come along and see them. So that's it really. Just final thank you for our panelists, and have a successful rest of the second half of the year. Thank you.
Thanks all.
Thanks very much.
Thanks very much.
Thanks, everybody.